are doing a union summer school over in Decatur at the UFCW hall, and so I figured it would be a good, a good opportunity to just go back to some educational stuff on the radio as well. It's been a minute since we've done, especially a Unions 101 type segment, and we want to do those every now and then because it's, we believe it's important. That's part of the project of our program here. So yeah. I have a Unions 101 presentation that I give new employees at work, so I'm going to I have adapted some of that a little bit for the radio, and I'm going to give it to you here. And we're going to be talking about, just super, super, super basic. What even is a union, right? What is a union? How do they work? Why do people want to join a union? How can you join a union? How can you get involved? How do you bargain a first contract? We're going to be going through all of that kind of stuff, obviously at a very high level. Any of these kind of topics, you could really spend hours on any of them, but just for the one-on-one level, we'll be able to do that in about 30 minutes. So, starting off with just the bare basics. What is a union, right? It's a very basic question, and it's something that, actually a lot of people are not going to be able to answer if you ask them this question. They're not going to be able to answer with any sort of level of coherence. Sometimes even union members are not going to be able to tell you what a union is because they've never actually thought about it very much. They just know that it's something that they're a part of, that is good for them, that gives them good things, that is the reason that they have, better wages, better benefits, and things like that. But they don't really know actually, logistically what is a union. And so the definition that I think makes the most sense is that a union is just a group of people who work together, who are organizing to make their workplace better. That's really it in a nutshell, right? And I know that, you can have an election and then the government will recognize you, and government recognition goes along with forcing the employer to negotiate with you in good faith. But people were organizing unions before it was legal to organize unions. People were organizing unions when it was expressly illegal to organize unions, right? People were being arrested and murdered by the state for organizing unions, right? And so I have always felt very strongly that it would not be honorable to their memory to say that you are only a union if you win an election and the government recognizes you, right? And you get all of the benefits that come with that. I think that you're a union if you come together and you say you're a union, right? Along with that, when you have people that are coming together to make their workplace better, you get that power of solidarity and mutual aid. Additionally, unions in this country are democratic. They're actually mandatorily democratic by law. There is a certain level of accountability that you have to have. Otherwise, you will get, the government taking action against you, and that's never good. So there are laws surrounding the governance of unions, and there is a certain level of accountability and democracy that unions have to have baked into them. Otherwise, they do run afoul of the law. Unions also give, by virtue of the fact that it is workers coming together and organizing collectively, it gives you power on the job. It gives you power and a collective voice to influence employers and policymakers. We'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. What is a union? It's two or more folks working together to make their workplace better. It is solidarity, it is democracy, it is power, it is mutual aid. That is what a union is, like theoretically, philosophically, right? But then, what is a union? If you think about that and you think about, like, what am I going to see when I see a union? Or more accurately, who am I going to see when I see a union? And specifically, what are the kind of people that you see in unions? And what people think when they think about unions is they think about, hard hat wearing construction workers. White guys with hard hats on construction jobs. That's all that they think of when they think of unions, or maybe a coal miner, right? And actually, those people are, there are a lot of folks in unions that work jobs like that, but that is not the majority of the labor movement. In fact, 46% of union workers are women. 36% of union workers are people of color. And this is a fun one. 42% of union workers have a bachelor's degree or higher. A lot of people think that you don't need a union if you have a bachelor's degree, if you're smart, if you work at a computer, right? They think that that's not necessary, that you don't need a union if you have one of those jobs or if you are educated. And that's just not true. And, it turns out that union workers know that because fully almost half of union workers have a bachelor's degree, right? So it's really important to, that really goes to show that anybody and everybody can and should be part of a union. 40% of union workers work in education or health services. Actually, the largest union in the country is the teachers union, is a teachers union. There are multiple, but the National Education Association with 3 million members is the largest union in the United States of America. 21% of union workers work in transportation, utilities, or manufacturing. That's where, those are some of the more kind of stereotypical union industries. And you can see with them only occupying 21% of it, they're only part of it, right? They're a big part and they're an important part, but it's only part of it. Anybody can be in a union. If you work for a wage, if you have a boss, then you can join a union, right? That's really the long and short of it. I think that it's worth going through that to kind of dispel some of the myths around who today's union workers are. So with that out of the way, we've gone over philosophically what is a union. And we've gone over, physically, like who are we going to see when we see a union? Now let's go back to some philosophy and let's think about how unions work. I talked about how, unions are about power, but let's dwell on that a little bit more, right? The reason that power from collective action and collective organization is important is because the relationship between you and your employer is not one of equals. Being in a union fixes that imbalance. And it's really intuitive if you think about it, because you know that if you are unhappy with your working conditions and you leave, basically no matter who you are, no matter how great you are at your job, the workplace is going to be able to go along fine the next day. Maybe it takes a little while to replace you. Maybe they're able to replace you the next day. But if you alone quit your job, that's not a deal breaker for any company, right? If you alone engage in some sort of protest, if you alone write some sort of letter, maybe because your boss just doesn't like conflict, or maybe even your boss is nice, if you, engage in those kinds of actions individually, maybe you'll be able to resolve it, but maybe you won't. And if you are able to resolve it, it's not because, you have that much power. It's just because, by the whim of your boss, right? But if everybody in your workplace got up and said, we are not working until this is fixed, we are not working until this is changed, well, you've stopped production, right? Your workplace simply cannot function if you do not have everybody working. There's a question about where does value come from? Does value come from labor or does value come from capital, right? And obviously, if you think about that, if you think about what happens when you remove all of the labor from an equation, then, the equation stops. If you remove all the capital from an equation, labor can create more capital, right? If you think about a manufacturing facility and you remove all of the capital-intensive goods, the machines that you need to do those sorts of manufacturing, you can create those machines again through labor, right? But those machines, which are capital, and capital is really just dead labor, those machines cannot create more labor. They have to have labor to create value, right? So labor is the source of all value. When I say labor creates all wealth, I very much mean that labor creates all wealth. Okay? Capital does not create wealth. Capital is dead labor. That's all it is. So, back to, how does this power work? If everybody in your workplace protests, if everybody in your workplace stands up and says, we're not working until this problem is fixed, well, then by golly, your boss is going to have to fix the problem. And that's the power that we're talking about. It doesn't even have to escalate all the way to a strike or even to a job action, but just having everybody pushing in one direction, everybody working for the same thing gives you power. It gives you much more power than you would have on your own. And that is what being in a union does. It fixes the imbalance. And that's where our strength comes from. And whether we change conditions through grievances, through job actions, or through political pressure, if we are not together, we don't have power. Right? And that's how unions work. Along those lines of being together, of having power collectively, we have dues. Dues is one of the first things that anti-union folks will try to talk about to try to make people scared of unions. They'll say that unions only want your dues. You'll get the same as you get without a union. You just won't have to pay the dues if you don't unionize. So don't unionize. Dues are bad. Dues are so bad. Wouldn't you hate to pay money to a union, et cetera, right? But union dues are very important. And it's not because unions are a business and we're just trying to grow and we want, it's just for the sake of itself, right? Union dues are important because they sustain the organization that is responsible for bringing power to working people. We do not, as workers, we are not individually wealthy, and we cannot, just on a dime, drop thousands of dollars for any reason, right? And so that's why it's important for everybody to pitch in a little bit in timely increments so that we can be able to have these types of resources, right? Because our employers, whether they are private sector employers or whether they're the government, our employers really have more or less kind of unlimited funds that they can do with what they want, particularly as it relates to fighting us. When we think about the popular organizing campaigns that we see in the news a lot, Starbucks and Amazon, and how they pay these union busters, hundreds of dollars an hour to convince us that we don't need a union. Workers don't have those resources, right? And so that's why we have to pool our resources together so that we can have resources that can help us to organize and to educate us. Those funds educate officers. They send us to trainings to help us learn the law, to help us learn how to organize better, to help us learn how to, negotiate some negotiating best practices, grievance best practices, et cetera, et cetera. And they also fund officer salaries or, pizza parties or things like that the union might have. They're very important, and I have, been a union dues payer, obviously, for the better part of a decade now, and I don't regret a cent of it. It's like $21 a pay period. It's like $42 a month. I don't regret 1 cent of it, and if you're a union member, you really shouldn't either. Additionally, budgets are approved democratically by members. People talk about how Maybe members don't like the way that their dues money are being spent. Well, unions have budgets that have to be approved by the members. They have treasurer's reports that have to be approved by the members. And so, in my union specifically, it's going to be different. The exact mechanisms are going to be different from union to union. But in my union specifically, every January, the budget committee creates a budget, and then they present that budget to the general meeting, and we painstakingly review that budget. And it is in my opinion, I think people spend way too much time on it. And I would be much more apt to just, approve it and go on. But, look, that's democracy in practice. And we really do. We spend hours on the budget and approving it for the year. And then even after we approve the budget, every single month, we get a treasurer's report at the meeting where we see every red cent that comes in and comes out of our union's bank account, and we approve it or we disapprove it. And if we have questions about charges, then we get to ask questions about it. And we can choose to not approve the treasurer's report and say, hey, you got to go back and fix something. We don't approve that expenditure. That wasn't in the budget. You got to fix this, right? You do not have that kind of power basically in any other organization that you can be a part of. You certainly don't have that kind of power at your job, right? And so that's a really cool thing about unions, about the level of democracy and accountability that unions have.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So, we've gone through what a union is and how it works. And so we're going to continue on into bargaining a contract. Okay. So I said that, when you have a union election, and if the union wins the election, then in the United States, there is a requirement on the employer to negotiate a contract in good faith with the union as the bargaining representative of the workers. And so once a union wins an election, or if a contract expires and you're renegotiating the contract, then typically, what you're going to see happen is the union is going to be surveying the members, asking questions about work and the workplace, what you like, what you would like to see change, what kind of raises you think would be appropriate, stuff like that. And then you will have, the union will select the bargaining committee. This is done in different ways in different unions. Some unions appoint the bargaining committee. Some unions elect the bargaining committee. My preference would be elections, but, I'm kind of very pro small. I'm a small d Democrat in that way, right? I like democracy, but not all unions do that. But once you have the negotiating committee will take a look at the member surveys and try to identify some key proposals. And then the union negotiating committee and the company negotiating committee will exchange proposals. They will negotiate. And then they'll try to come to an agreement. Now, sometimes you're not going to be able to come to an agreement, or you're not going to be able to come to an agreement quickly. And so you might have to you might have to take a vote to strike. And now this is something that another thing that anti-union types like to do is they like to fearmonger about strikes. What they won't tell you is that you have a say in whether or not you go on strike, right? You have to vote to authorize a strike before the union can call a strike. And that's what happens anytime you see a strike. It's because the members have authorized it, right? So if you don't think that you need to strike over an issue, then you can vote not to strike over an issue. If there's like an impasse, then the negotiating committee might request strike authorization. They'll have the vote. Presumably, the vote comes back yes. We empower the negotiating committee to strike if necessary. And then you might see a strike. And that is something that will, put some more pressure on the company to negotiate a contract. Once you get a tentative agreement, the tentative agreement will be shared with the members, and the members will be able to review it and take a look at it, and then they'll be able to vote yay or nay. If the members like the contract, then they'll be able to vote yes and accept it, and then there you go. You have a new contract, and you have new conditions of employment. If you vote no, then it's back to the negotiating table to try to fix whatever it was that the employees, the members of the union, were unhappy with. Some things that you might see in a union contract are, really there's the sky is the limit. The Chicago Teachers Union is requesting housing for students in their contract negotiations, which is really, really cool. And I hope that they're able to see that. I hope that they're able to get that in this round of contract negotiations. But you're going to see things like wages, insurance, retirement. Union members are basically some of the only people left in the country that have pensions. That's probably worth mentioning. Some health and safety procedures. You have just cause for discipline, which is a really important thing. If you are not in a union workplace, you do not have a collective bargaining agreement, you are an at-will employee. That's anywhere in the country. You're an at-will employee, which means that you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all, which I think is BS, and I think we should outlaw it. I don't think that's a good state of affairs, but nevertheless, that is the state of affairs that exists, unless you have a union contract where and you have a just cause provision in your contract, which will, lay out the procedures for discipline, and presumably you'll have some sort of progressive discipline in there. And you'll have, criteria that you can be punished for or ultimately terminated for. You'll also see, provisions about time off, scheduling, how overtime works. You'll have education and training, fair transfer procedures, staffing provisions, diversity provisions, seniority provisions, things like this. Seniority is another thing that for some reason employers think is a good way to, lambast unions, and it's something that I've never really understood, because seniority seems to me like it is one of the most common sense things that you could have in a contract. Well, some of the reasons that are given for not liking seniority is that, if I work harder than this 65, 70-year-old guy and I produce more, then I should be able to make more money than him, right? Why shouldn't I? And that just doesn't make sense to me. And I think that, if people were to think about it for more than 2 seconds, they would agree. But, if this guy is 67, 70 years old, has been working for this company for 50 years, then no doubt he also had times where he was 20 and working really good and was very, very productive, right? But he sacrificed those years of his life, the best years, most of his waking life. He sacrificed to a company. And so, I think he deserves actually a lot, like a hell of a lot for that sacrifice. And yes, I think that means he should make more money than a 25-year-old who is more productive. He should have a priority over a 25-year-old who is more productive in terms of, reductions in force or layoffs or things like this. Right? You should have seniority should get you a lot, right? I think that makes sense. Now, the important thing about a union contract is that it's negotiated by the union, which is made up of the workers. So if workers in a certain workplace don't agree with me that seniority is an important thing, they could outvote me and not put much weight on seniority. And that's the beauty of democracy, right? If people in some workplace say, I don't care about seniority, I just want to be, compensated for productivity, well, I think that's dumb, but you could put that in your union contract if you wanted, right? It's totally up to you. That's the beauty of democracy and the beauty of a union and what you can do in a union. I think that's great, even if I disagree with it. So now we get to contract enforcement. Okay, so we've bargained a contract, we've got a great contract, we've got seniority, but, now comes enforcement. Because if you don't enforce it, it's just a piece of paper. And so one of the first lines of defense are going to be union stewards. Stewards are trained in, grievance procedures. They're sent off for union trainings to learn about labor law, to learn about, how to do investigations, to, you get all sorts of training as a union steward, or you should. Stewards are the ones that are going to file grievances when a contract is violated and hold management to account. And ultimately, the grievance procedure typically ends in like binding arbitration or something like that. So, having stewards and having active stewards and having an active membership who reports to stewards regularly is very important to enforcing the contract. Because, you could theoretically have the best contract in the world, but if you don't make sure, if you don't stop management when they try to violate it, it's just a piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything. The bottom line is that without a union, management controls all the decisions. In non-union workplaces, management has the right to set or change each worker's pay, benefits, working conditions at any time for any reason without consultation. They also have the right to fire workers for any reason or no reason. Right? I think that's BS. I think that you shouldn't have to put up with that. And that's why I think that, everybody should join a union. But nevertheless, that's not the state of affairs that we are in right now. So in a union workplace, you have a contract that you have negotiated and that neither you nor management can change on a whim. You have to negotiate changes in the contract. I think that's really beautiful. Now, speaking of enforcing the contract, some people think that unions only help bad workers, right? That's a real misconception, I think. One reason that it's a misconception is that most people who actually come to the union and need help never think they are going to be the ones who need help. Every single person that I have taken through the grievance process to a person has said something along the lines of, I never thought it would be me. Right. I always thought that I worked great. I've always had a great relationship with my supervisor. I always do good work. But, now this issue has risen and I can't seem to find relief. And that's actually the situation that most people who have to come to the union for help find themselves in. In addition to that, unions can only enforce the contract or make change that the membership is behind, right? So management is never going to agree to a contract that does not allow them to discipline or terminate a worker who is really harming production, right? You're just never going to get a contract like that. Management would never agree to it. So anytime that a union gets an employee their job back, they were able to do that because management didn't follow the contract, right? So that's an important thing for people to recognize when they feel like, unions are only helping the bad employees. The union is only able to enforce the contract or make change that the membership is behind, right? Members don't like working with unproductive coworkers, right? That's something that nobody likes, to work with somebody who is not carrying their weight. So if you are, a worker, you want to have somebody next to you that you don't feel like you have to do their job for them. And so they're not even going to ask for a contract that doesn't allow you to discipline workers because they don't want that either. They want, they're going to want a contract where management can discipline and can, build up a productive workforce. Additionally, a lot of times if you show me a bad worker, actually, I'll be able to just show you a worse boss, right? Because management has a job. That job is training and supervision. And a lot of times, if people aren't productive, people aren't able to do the job that they're supposed to, it's because they haven't gotten the adequate training. And so that's an important thing to recognize, I think. So there you go. That is kind of the introduction to unions that I have prepared today. That's really the long and short of it. Hope that was helpful. We believe here at the Valley Labor Report that going back to this, basic level of education is important sometimes. So yeah, hope it's been beneficial.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.